support. Curtis Fleming is there on the edge of the area. Fleming for Craig Hignett. Hit it, Higgy. Higgy hits the treble!
Avenelli coming alive again. Juninho wants the ball played to him. Avenelli spots out Emerson!
Hello and welcome to the Boro Breakdown podcast. After a fifth defeat in a row, Boro dropped down to 13th, and unfortunately for me and Tom, we have the displeasure of talking about it. Now, of course, we start the show with our wonky takeouts, but before we get into ours, just want to mention a few that we got sent to us on the socials. Chris says, same old story. John, borrowed time. Another John, inevitable. And Simon on Blue Sky says, regarding Carrick, I think the lady is ready to sing. Tom, what is your one key takeout from yet another Middlesbrough defeat?
My one key takeout is something I mentioned in our group chat on Friday night, in that I don't know what I've done in a past life to end up supporting Boro, because it feels like, and you mentioned this on the last show as well, but it just feels like we are stuck in a constant cycle, and it is like being in purgatory. Like, the fact that this happens pretty much every season now, and the disappointing thing was at the start we thought we were onto something with Carrick, and now it's just going downhill. And you know what, we were having these same conversations last season, in that
we were, yeah,
writing off any hope of the playoffs and season's over. Can we just finish it now? Looking forward to the summer. And I'm just getting to the point where I'm like, I'm not even looking forward to the summer either, because nothing ever changes. We're still going to be stuck in the same position because apparently we've all been terrible people in a past life and ended up as Boro supporters.
Yeah, you know what? You were a big mood actually after Friday night. What you said there of like, what have I done in this life to support Middlesbrough, was probably the best message that you sent, because it just hit the right tone, didn't it? I mean, I truly don't know what to say anymore. I feel like we should probably rename this podcast from the Boro Breakdown to the Broken Record, because we keep seeing the same things, therefore we keep saying the same things. And I feel like I'm living in a simulation, and somebody is testing every single Boro fan out there to see basically the measure of their patience and how long it will take for them to break, because 5 defeats in a row is quite spectacular. I think if we switch the reality somewhat and pretend that defeats actually are the good thing rather than the bad thing, then well done, Boro, keep it up. But we're not as delusional as that, you know. We can't kind of hang on to the hope that we can warp reality in that way. But yeah, it's just the biggest, longest, deepest sigh that you can imagine right now with Boro. The form is terrible. The performances aren't getting better. And here we are talking about yet another defeat. And unfortunately, it is that part of the show where we have to talk about it, the Bristol City game, because let's be real. Whenever we come to Ashton Gate, we always seem to struggle. We never really get a result. Last time that we beat Bristol City was in 2021. Tom, how would you assess this version of Boro being crap against Bristol City?
You know what? I think it was made worse by the fact that it's broadcasted on Google Earth, because you can see so many more things going wrong at the same time. Yeah, even when we went 1-0 up, I was just kind of like, we haven't deserved that at all. I was like, I didn't think Bristol City had played particularly well up to that point either. But I don't know, we just still weren't good. And don't get me wrong, I was happy that we scored. I thought even if we can see out a win under these circumstances, it might just get a little bit of confidence back, might get us back on the right track. But then the fact that, you know, I wasn't even surprised at what happened in the second half. And you look at that second goal and just look at 9 players turn around and just watch it happen. Hackney was the only one who reacted, but even that was far too late. And I don't know, you just look at that and just like, it just sums it up, doesn't it? Like, just 9 players just watching a goal go in. Don't get me wrong, it's obviously quick reactions off the crossbar and stuff, but at the same time, who was marking, the guy who scored? You could go with some examples of, say, other more, say, pragmatic managers that we've had in the past. Under them, would the same thing have happened? Would we have that same lapse in concentration? I don't think so. And I think lapses of concentration are something I'm just seeing more and more from Boro at the moment. And I'm just seeing more and more signs that, as I've said, quite a while ago with like misplaced passes and stuff, more and more signs of the end, and these lapses of concentration are a big one. But yeah, overall, and I think this might just be what we need to rename the podcast to, frustration, because it must be at this point the most used word on this podcast.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it just sums up that performance, and let's be real, most of the performances that we've had recently.
Yeah, it's very apt that after your Google Earth quip on the last pod, it was someone called fucking Earthy that scored. I mean, you couldn't make that shit up, could you? Like, yeah, you know what? That game, I actually thought, like, it was the performance of a team that are incredibly fragile, that are incredibly out of form, and have a complete dearth of confidence. Because I actually thought when the ball was coming towards Middlesbrough, we showed a little bit of promise in actually being somewhat solid. There was a few blocks from Rav and Fry. Whenever we were stretched out wide, depending on what side we were on, you'd see the centre midfielder drop into the back line to cover that space, to make sure that we didn't get caught in that half space. And yet, even with that, we still look vulnerable. And we look vulnerable from playing out from the back. Like, Travers looked like he hadn't kicked a football before. He looked incredibly susceptible to press from the Bristol City forward line. And I think that although they didn't score from that avenue, I think we got pretty fortunate that we didn't actually concede in that way, because it seemed like Sinclair Armstrong in particular, leading that press from the front, sensed a bit of danger there, sensed a bit of weakness, vulnerability, fragility, whatever you want to call it. And then again, that word frustrating, it frustrates me that even though structurally I actually think Boro was somewhat decent, individually in moments, especially when we're in possession, we just looked like a car crash. And it really is owing to the lack of confidence within this team that we're playing out from the back and we look so shaky doing it. Obviously, it's Michael Carrick's philosophy, so he'll plough forward with it regardless. But God, we just look so brittle. That's probably another word that you can add. And then going forward, we look completely disjointed. Really, like, the lack of connections within that front line is obvious, of course, because Whittaker's a new player, Iheanacho's a new player. The combinations that we saw with Finazaz and Latte completely broken now, because Finazaz cripplingly out of form, Latte not at the club anymore, and scored twice on his MLS debut, which is glorious. I loved seeing that message when I first woke up this morning. Really made me happy. And we just look like a team that is really trying and failing to get anything going up front. There was a chance from Bergsorg that he should have scored. He just mishit it completely. And that was a big chance. It might have been before the goal or after, I don't know. And there was a ball actually that Borges put in. He stood his marker up and he was one-on-one with him, and there was space. There was a whole cemetery of space in front of him, and he just shifts his body, little drop of the shoulder, gives himself half a yard to get the ball into the box, delivers a wonderful ball in the box. No one was there. Nobody
I know
was
the
there.
one you're talking about as well, because the commentators on Sky Sports were talking about that for a good minute afterwards, saying it's where you want it. It's right in that corridor of uncertainty. And there was just no one there attacking it. And I'd have at least expected Conway to be attacking that, because to me, he's the only one who kind of has that sense of positioning in terms of attack, in terms of striking, in that front four. I'd have expected him to be kind of, anticipating that. But yeah, it was, earlier in the season, likely someone would have gone on to that. Now it's just kind of like, you got a player doing such a good cross like that, and then no one's anticipating it or no one's running in, and it's the difference between a team that's like playing well and going for the playoffs and one that's bereft of confidence.
Yeah, we don't have any killers in this team. We have players out wide that, yeah, they want to shoot and score, they want to cut in and score. No one's making a run that you would see. I think Stuani was really good at it, wasn't he? Where he would be out wide right, but then he'd make that near post run or far post run. Very good. Just smelling out that opportunity. Boro don't have players like that. I think Boro have players that want the ball to feed, that want to play it safe, that don't really want to take risks on and off the ball. And yeah, it is indicative of a side that are just bereft of confidence, but also even with confidence, I don't think that we have the players that will see a crossing opportunity like that and go for it and really try to attack it. It's been a problem all season, I would say, and it's not really changing. It's one of the many things actually with this team that just aren't changing. You mentioned it a little bit ago, Tom, but when we went ahead, you weren't confident that we could get something from that game, were you?
No. When we scored, I mean, I didn't celebrate at first, and my girlfriend was like, I was expecting you to be a little bit happier than that. And I was like, to be honest, I was expecting the flag, so I didn't celebrate.
Yeah.
Then watched the replay and was like, right, he was miles onside, so can be a bit happier now. There was always the hope that we would see it out, but we've seen it so many times under this team where we'll get a goal up and then it's not even a position where you would start to feel safe because you might come out for the second half. And I'll say, for example, it wasn't a goal up, but Sheffield United, we get a goal back. You think, right, that might boost confidence, but then you come out for the second half and it's completely the opposite. Similar thing here. You think going into half-time 1-0 up, we should have the right to feel more confident in the second half. Bristol are going to have to come at us. Maybe we can hit them on the counter-attack, get another, see the game out, and then you got 3 points. And you just watch that second half and it's like, what is going on in the changing rooms at half-time? Like, what's being said? Because no one, even though we've got that goal, no one seems to have that confidence there, and the lapses in concentration are still there, and like I say, it's something we see too many times now to expect anything different, and that's really quite demoralising as a supporter to know that even at 1-0 up, that game could still and will likely still go against you. So yeah, it was really disappointing, but still half expected.
Yeah, I think my default setting, honestly, is to expect a defeat against Bristol City, even if we are winning. We could be winning about 3-0, and I would still expect us to find a way to lose against them. I tell you what, when you want in a win to alleviate any sort of pressure on the manager, on the players, on the season, you do not want to be caught at ASHTON Gate. Like, you really don't. They've got good home form this season, and anyway, against Bristol City, we don't. We have a pretty rough record. We don't tend to get results against them. And so when we went 1-0 up, I didn't celebrate either because, full transparency, I just don't care about the season anymore. I said it in a previous podcast. My feeling is going, and I'm somebody that's very emotive, and I feel a lot, but I just don't. It's almost like I've accepted our fate. And what I will say, what has changed in recent weeks, recent results, obviously because we've lost 5 in a row, I previously thought, yeah, we'll get into the top 6. We won't do anything in the playoffs, but we'll get into the top 6. Now I don't even feel like we will. Like, we're 7 points off as we're recording. We're in 13th. I had to scroll down FOTMob to see where we were yesterday. Like, let's be real, we've seen worse since we started this podcast, but 13th, man, we're in the bottom half of the table. That's quite some slide down, and like everybody, well, most people expected that. Michael Carrick said after the West Brom win, he was rather dismissive, and I would even say a tad arrogant, when he said, why is the glass half empty all the time? I don't understand it. Well, he's got his answer, because the run that we're on right now, I think a lot of people probably saw something similar to this coming, because Middlesbrough have posted poor performances all year. So this is not a surprise. So it's frustrating. A lot of people, including the Sky commentator, actually mentioned Kelechi Iheanacho and how he probably should have been taken off before he was. Listen, I really agree with that, because there was a point in which Iheanacho made a run forward, and as usual, the Sky cameras panned on him a little bit. And he looked like me engaging in any form of physical activity, and I have a stitch after about 2 minutes. Like, he looked like he was blowing out of his ass. And I think we're quite lucky to actually get a yard's run out of Kelechi Iheanacho, because the bloke just doesn't move. And to be fair, he's currently Finazaz's replacement, I guess, just playing off Tommy Conway, and Finazaz doesn't really move anyway. But at least he has creative nous. He's got that passing ability, vision. He's out of form, yes, but in terms of his skill set, he can offer that. With Iheanacho, I haven't seen it recently. I watched him. He had a few good moments in the first half before Conway's goal. Of course, he took the shot that led to Conway scoring. But honestly, when you want an instant impact, Kelechi Iheanacho is not the man that you go to. He's not in form. He looks unfit. And for me, he should have been taken off earlier than he was for Finazaz. And I actually thought that in the Watford game as well. Space has been that match for Finazaz to potentially attack. A much better fit, I think. Much better profile of a player to be able to take spaces within a football match and utilise them. Again, I know that he's out of form. But go on.
I say a worry I have with Iheanacho, and just as I've noticed him kind of starting the games since his loan spell started. I hope we haven't agreed to something where he has to play the majority of the games if he's fit, because obviously clearly he's not, but like he can play a game. I know that Finazaz is out of form, but I still feel like as building up that link between Azaz and Conway is the better way to go, rather than building up a link between Iheanacho and Conway. Iheanacho, who, let's face it, is likely to go back at the end of the season. I hope it's not one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, it's a big name player, so he has to play if he's fit. I don't know if those clauses actually exist, or that's just speculation when we or any other club have these kind of big name players on loan where they start all the time. But yeah, I hope the club hasn't put themselves in that position, because I do think that would be daft in this situation.
Yeah, it's a good point about the links and the connections between players. We actually saw it. We saw two key connections being developed last season. Finazaz and Latte-Lath, Luke Ayling and Latte-Lath. They're beneficial. We didn't really see the continuation of the Ayling and Latte-Lath one, but we did with Finazaz and Latte-Lath. So, yeah, I mean, Iheanacho is likely to go back to Sevilla next season, unless, as you said, there is something within that deal that potentially could make it permanent. So players as and Conway, I do feel like we're going to mention, because it's not just Iheanacho, let us be really clear on that. None of the January signings have, probably with the exception of Travers, who, despite being poor with the ball at his feet, I think bailed us out against Bristol City quite a few times with some good saves. I feel sorry for him. Someone should get him some therapy, because he probably needs it, being the goalkeeper of this team. But with him aside, none of the January signings have really made an impact, like a positive instant impact, which is what you're wanting when you're embroiled in a playoff battle. But we brought in out-of-form players to an out-of-form team, so nothing's really going to change with the narrative there. And I feel like we'll look back at this January transfer window just gone. We'll definitely reference it in the summer, and we will probably reference it next January as well as what not to do. An example of what not to do, because it's not broken us, because I think Boro were already on their way to breaking before the window. It's not propped us up, has it? It's not improved us. On paper, you'll say, oh, Ayling Jr.'s played Champions League recently, Iheanacho is a big name player, Morgan Whittaker had that fantastic season last season. But in truth, right now, we're bringing in players that, as I said, they aren't in form.
Yeah, I think looking at the January transfer window as well, I feel like Iheanacho in particular was a bit of a panic because I didn't think that we could get our first choice replacement for Lad Ilaf. I understand why Lad Ilaf was sold. I think reading like the Gazette articles and Echo articles over the last couple of weeks, and it's like if we were where Sunderland are now, then we likely wouldn't have sold that Olaf. But the club still does need these big sales to kind of keep going, and I think it does pretty much balance us out in terms of our net spend this year. It's really not an ideal time to be selling your best striker, but is that interest going to be there in the summer? So you've got to kind of ideally that deal would have been done a lot sooner. But yeah, it did seem like Iheanacho in particular was a bit of a panic at the end of the window. We need someone through the door, 6-month loan. We obviously have the option to buy. I wouldn't think many Boro fans at the moment would want to see us take up that option. We'd have to see a drastic improvement, between now and the end of the season before anyone would be clamouring for that. Illan Jr., I've heard, was a similar kind of thing to Dork. He was, available. We thought he'd hit the ground running. Really haven't seen it yet. I think the only one I can kind of really not argue with is the sale of Jones and bringing in Whittaker, which was, Whittaker was a direct result of letting Jones go. Because I can at least, understand that we've made money on Jones, we spent it on Whittaker, like for like, pretty much. Although Whittaker is more of the kind of like cut inside off the right type of player, whereas Jones wasn't. It's maybe going more towards the kind of inside forward inverted winger type thing that we clearly want to do and play inside a bit more, but. That's the only one I can really not argue with in terms of the January transfer window. I don't think it was a good one for us at all. And like you said, we were on a downhill slope anyway before that January transfer window. I think it's probably just exasperated things a little bit more.
Yeah, you know what? I do sympathise with the recruitment team because I can imagine it's really difficult to bring in a striker that's gonna that is gonna give you that impact and gonna make that instant impact in January, because a lot of these players, they're like probably another team's most important asset, right? What you're looking at. So I can imagine it's very difficult. And Iheanacho does feel like a stopgap option, and maybe it feels unfair to speak about him so in depth, but I think it's just because we let somebody go in like Elath, who was just incredibly effective in this system, and we knew was very good in this system because his returns spoke that, to somebody that I just don't see it. There's a big difference in how both players play the game, and I just don't think that the return's going to be anywhere near, and I never thought that, to be honest. But Tom, on changes, because we'll go back to that, Manning made 3 changes on 63 minutes, one of which won Bristol City the game in George Earthy. In contrast, Carrick didn't make a change until the 83rd minute. Carrick's got stick in the past for his lack of in-game management and being not so proactive, shall we say. Would you say that's fair, particularly in Friday night's case?
Yeah, and it's constantly frustrating. I also think that this is another one of those. I don't want to kind of make it a thing, but those signs that it's coming towards the end, because I'm pretty sure we've had these sorts of talks about managers before. Whether that was Wilder, Warnock, Woodgate, and anyone. To be fair, I don't think Woodgate was as bad. I think he was very much the type to try stuff during a game. If I'm remembering right, I might be completely wrong there. But I feel like this is a conversation that we often have towards the end of a manager's tenure. And like I say, I think it was most noticeable in the playoff games in his first season, where Mark Robbins, in terms of in-game management, completely outmanaged Carrick in those situations, and he's just not learned since then. And this is another reason why I've kind of mentioned on the pod in the past, like, why don't we bring someone in who, like, on the coaching staff, who has a little bit more experience, maybe has a bit more of a tactical background or something like that. Not Aaron Danks, before anyone starts kind of commenting on in our YouTube or whatever and saying he's the reason why, because we still lost 7 games at the start of last season with Aaron Danks on the coaching staff. Didn't make that much of a difference. What the kind of thing I'm talking about is, under Carrick and also under Woodgate, the club's kind of gone for this kind of like, oh yeah, we've got this young coaching staff who's going to develop these players and play this attacking, exciting football. And you can have all that. I mean, you can't argue with the fact that this coaching staff and Michael Carrick have developed players. They have. It shows in the sales that we've had. But a clear weakness of Carrick, and you can probably add the coaching staff to this as well, is that there's no one there with that type of tactical expertise who can say to Carrick during a game, let's change this up. Or if, even if someone already is saying that, get Carrick to listen and say, let's change this up, and actually make an impact on the game. And this is, I don't know if it was a Carrick decision of who was on his coaching staff or what. I can only draw the line between Carrick's coaching staff and Woodgate's, but in both situations, it's been like, we want this kind of young coaching staff, none of which have this kind of tactical expertise, and then we get outmanaged. And I don't understand the kind of aversion to bringing in more bodies on the coaching team who can make that sort of a difference.
Yeah, you know what? You mentioned Matt Robbins there, and Matt Robbins had an assistant, Eddie Vivesh, who, when he left Coventry, a lot of their fans were saying that he was the brains behind it. You often hear that, don't you? That phrase, the brains behind the operation. Same with Alan Nill and Chris Wilder. These
Wayne Rooney and Liam
coaches,
Rosenior, probably the biggest example of it at the moment.
yeah, like there's like coaching setups, coaching contingents, which has a really key component in it, and oftentimes it's not actually the manager, it's the assistant. And so yeah, maybe that's something that's been, I remember when Michael Carrick first came in, actually, we were talking about an assistant and adding that experience to what is an inexperienced manager in Carrick at the time, and even probably still now. He's still very much learning, and I mean, he's making changes, but they're not working. So that's what also makes me think that we're nearing the end of Michael Carrick's time, because we've seen him make tweaks. Maybe what's actually needed instead of tweaks is substantial difference, changing the formation, completely having an overhaul. Maybe that's the territory that we're etching into, which I wouldn't usually say or suggest as a potential solution, but because I've just seen little things that aren't working here, there, and everywhere. What's next?
It could be that, or it could just be increase the amount of proactivity during a match. Like we mentioned, Manning made 3 changes on 63 minutes. We didn't make a change until the 83rd. On one hand, I can kind of understand it if a manager's looking at it thinking, we're 1-0 up, things are obviously working to get us in this position, but they weren't. We were still making some of the same mistakes. And in a proactive approach, you could have looked at that and think, right, things are working, but how can they work even better to see this game out? And we just didn't do that. Whereas Manning got it spot on. Things aren't working. We'll put 3 new players on, and then Google Earth, he scores 2, and we lose the game.
Fuck's sake. Honestly, I'm going to blame you for George Earth scoring. Like, you basically put the script out there and allowed him to write on it, because Jesus Christ.
I think I might have generated him into existence because I'd never heard of him before that.
No, neither. And you know what? I think they were his first 2 goals for Bristol City. Isn't that great? And maybe his first 2 senior goals, although he potentially scored another one before that, because I heard someone say that he's like scored 3, but
it's absolutely typical for us. It would be either the first ever goal or this player hasn't scored since 1999, so he's going to score against us. I fully assumed that Naki Wells was going to score against us as well, because I feel like he always does. I think all that game was missing was like Matt Derbyshire coming off the bench and scoring.
Oh God, that's a name. Yeah, I feel like we're Tottenham right now. I feel like we are the butt of the joke, that everyone's taking the piss out of us. Obviously, you had the Tommy Conway fingers in ears celebration, which I think was entirely fair because they were calling him a wanker all game, so give a little bit back. But everything with Boro seems to age horrendously, and then when George Earthy scored the winner, he's doing the exact same thing afterwards, and I'm just like, oh, here we go again, another player taking the piss out of us. Because earlier in the week, actually, Sky Sports were taking the piss out of us with a whole compilation of our mistakes this season. It's like, it's cringeworthy, to be honest. I feel like how Tottenham fans feel, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But I just mentioned Tommy Conway there. He did return to ASHTON Gate and scored. It was inevitable. It had to be him. Out of all the signings this year, have you been impressed with Tommy Conway, Tom?
Yeah, I have been. I was happy that we signed him. When I heard in the summer that he was on the move, it was very much one of those players where I was like, oh God, like I'd love to have him at Boro. And then it emerged that it was us and Hull going for him. And I was like, this is great. And then Burnley went in for him, and I was like, no, please no. And then we got him. I'm very happy with how he's done. And like I say, in terms of what I mentioned earlier, that I rate him a little bit higher than Latte Laugh, he just has a little bit more composure, or a lot more composure in front of goal in most cases. You look at his goals return to his minutes played, and it is the best in our team, and it still was when Latte Laugh was here as well. I think he's been unlucky with the injury that he's had. Hopefully he can get a little bit more game time now in the second half of the season. But I just think he's that kind of instinctive striker that I don't think we've really had since, say, Patrick Bamford. That he is quite intelligent in the runs that he makes, and he has a good finish on him. I do still think there's more to come from him. It's just the case of creating chances for him to get on the end of.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Bamford, actually, because I remember doing the lowdown on him, and I think I compared him to Bamford, actually. He's got the highest goals per 90 in the Championship. Joel Perrault, Josh Sargent, Haji Wright, like these players underneath him, like beneath him in that metric, are all having great seasons. So that's good company for Tommy Conway to be in. I like him. I think he is a shithouse, first and foremost. I just know that a lot of Championship defenders hate him and probably think he's an absolute rat. But I love that. Like, I love that we've got a player like that. He's very nippy. I think his acceleration is very quick off the mark, and it allows him to just nip in there, steal in there ahead of a tackle and win a foul. And he did that yesterday. He's done that a few times this season. I quite like that trait of him. Just very quick and difficult to stop. And yeah, of all the players that we have, I think he's the one that could be the killer that I mentioned earlier on. I just want to see more fitness from him, and of course he got that injury on Boxing Day, and that basically curtailed the momentum that he was building up. But he's got that starting berth now, and I would like to see him in front of Finn Azaz. I'd like to see that partnership being developed, because these are two players that are contracted to us, and so I'd like to see that development, that connection blossom, because I really do think that it could. He's got good movement. Finn Azaz on his day, he's got good passing, good creativity. So if we're looking at with reasons to be optimistic for next season, maybe them two together are one of them. I just want to mention a positive, actually, before we go into my carrot, because we can be a little bit doom and gloom. I mean, it's understandable. We've lost 5 games in a row. But I just want to mention a positive, and that is Neto Borges. Now, Borges was pictured videoed going right up to the fans at Ashton Gate on Friday. Very disappointed. And he looked genuinely gutted. And I actually want to say off the back of that Borges in the last 2 games, I think, has been good. He's clearly taken Ryan Giles's signing personally and said, you know what, I've got competition here and I'm going to perform. And I think that he has. And honestly, right now I'd rather have Borges in the team than Ryan Giles. And that's symbolic of his improvement. And also Ryan Giles has not had a great deal of it since he's come back to Middlesbrough, which maybe we should have expected. He's had a pretty rough 2 years. But I just want to shout out Neto Borges. I know we don't have a praise in place. It feels like we haven't really had a praise in place for weeks, understandably. But I do want to say that I think he's been good recently, and that's definitely a positive. So let's talk about Michael Carrick then. This week, post last Sunday's pod, he was given a vote of confidence from Steve Gibson. Tom, was that the right thing to do think?
I don't know. I'm wondering if it's the kind of stereotypical vote of confidence that means if we lose against Stoke, he's out, and that vote of confidence was the last kind of thing. But I mean, last week during our podcast on Sunday, and we spoke about this afterwards, and we were both kind of doing the same thing. We were both refreshing the Boro Twitter page and site and stuff during during the podcast, just to make sure that nothing was happening, and the podcast wasn't going to age very quickly after it came out, because we could have covered it in real time. But it seems like everyone was expecting it after the Watford game, and then there was the vote of confidence, very public in the echo, saying no, Michael Carrick can still do it. I still feel like there was a lot of doubt there, and I do think that he has lost a lot of the supporters now. I think I'm at that point, to be totally honest. I don't think there's any way back from it where the club recruited how they did in the summer, and then to have the fall off that we've had, and to be at 13th at this stage of the season. I think we're going backwards now, and what I really hope for a reaction, but I've been hoping for that for the last few games. I was hoping for one from the Sunderland game against Sheffield United. We played worse. I was hoping that, we might see a bit of a reaction from the Sheffield United game against Watford. First 10, 15 minutes, thought we were getting it. Then we bottle it and lose 1-0. Then, is there going to be some sort of a reaction from the Watford game and the vote of confidence for Carrick? Will we play better against Bristol City? No, of course we won't, because we're going to play shit in that one as well. It doesn't seem like Carrick has the answers. And just on Neto Borges, you mentioned that, I also thought he played well against Bristol City. I think the emotions coming out from him at the end of the game and the frustrations, I think in general the team is still together. You saw it in the celebrations after the goal. I don't think this is a Michael Carrick's lost the dressing room, or there's rifts in the team or anything like that. I think the source of that frustration is they are trying what they're being told to do, and it's not working, and no one seems to have the answers. And I just think with that sort of scenario, you need a sort of fresh perspective to come in there. And what I would hope is that financially, especially in the transfer market, we have been run better in the last few years in terms of the sales we're making, and it's making us able to be a little bit more competitive every year. If the worst for Carrick is to happen, I don't know if that would be the worst for the club at the moment. I hope that would mean that we'd be able to push the boat out a little bit more on management as well. And maybe that, we're not going to be looking at someone who it's their first job in management or something like that. We might be able to get someone a little bit more proven, back them with a coach and staff, and see what they can get out of these players. Because, like I think I said it last week, these players haven't become bad overnight. something's going on there in terms of how they're being told to play. That's my personal opinion, because I don't think it's that Carrick's lost the dressing room or there's like rifts in the team or anything. I just think it's how they're being told to play at the moment, and maybe there's someone else out there who can get a better tune out of these players.
Well, we did run a poll on Michael Carrick on, was it Friday night, I think, after the Bristol City game, which is probably not the best timing for it, but 65.6% of people said Carrick out. 34.4% of people said Carrick in. If you didn't vote in that poll, let us know in the comments, replies, however you want to get in touch with us. Are you still in support of Michael Carrick? I think for me, I am completely apathetic to Boro's managerial situation, as I mentioned, but I just want things to improve. I just want Carrick to work it out. And ultimately, because we just keep seeing the same things and there's actually no real notable improvements with the team generally and the results as well, of course, I just don't have faith that you can turn it around. And that is a really, really big shame. Tom, if results continue how they are, how long do you think he has until Boro make a decision?
If it were up to me, the day after the Stoke game, if we were to lose that. Of course, it's not up to me, though. It is with Steve Gibson, who is widely regarded as, best chairman in the country, a chairman every manager would love to work for. I do kind of wonder if that reputation's maybe to a fault at this point, in that we've maybe given Carrick a little bit too long. Because I said on last week's pod, we give him 2 to 3 more games, lose all them, playoffs are completely out of sight. So that in time would possibly be proven to be the wrong decision. But yeah, it's a difficult one, because I think as fans as well, and given what happened in the first season, we all wanted Carrick to do well, and we all thought that Carrick was going to be the one to take us back up. But then you look at it now, results and the slides only going in one direction. And, after events in the last couple of weeks, Carrick's the longest tenured manager in the Championship. It can't exactly be argued that he hasn't been given enough time or anything like that. It has been, nearly 3 years now. We've had a lot of changes in that time. The team is very much in his image now, so there's no real excuses as to why we should be in 13th at this stage of his third season. So yeah, I think to go back to the question, if it were up to me, it would be after Stoke. If we were to lose that, of course. I feel like realistically it might be after Derby, though, if we were to lose that as well. Because if we lose against Stoke and then we go on to lose against Derby at the Riverside, if we thought it was toxic after Watford, it is going to be so much worse after Derby.
Yeah, I'm thinking the Derby game as well. I kind of looked at the next run of fixtures last week, which included the Bristol City game, and I kind of thought, right, if we don't get a win in those games, just to stop the rot and alleviate that pressure, then I feel like he's gone. He does have, as you mentioned, the poison chalice, I'm going to call it, of being the longest serving manager in the Championship. How long is he going to be the longest serving manager in the Championship? Because if this trajectory keeps on, then that vote of confidence from Steve Gibson will be no vote of confidence anymore, and he will be gone. So it's a really tricky one. Let's move on to podcast questions then, because we do have some interesting ones to tackle this week. Podcast questions, you know exactly where to find us. We're on Twitter, Instagram, email, Facebook, Blue Sky as well now too. The first question comes from Chiswick Fox Tom, and he says, how did what we thought was the best squad we had in years fail so abysmally? Do we now need yet another full summer rebuild?
I think it's tactical reasons. Like I said earlier, these players haven't become bad overnight. I know a lot of people's opinions change on form for example, last season, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, Rav van den Berg, Player of the Year, he's going to be our record sale at some point." And then I've also seen people now saying we'd be lucky to get 10 to 15 million off him, off Palace in the January transfer window. Like, the opinions change so much on form, but I did think it was a good squad going into this season. Obviously, bringing Aidan Morris, who has been one of the highlights of the season for me. We still have a couple of weak areas. I would think mainly at both full-back positions, but I still do think it's tactical, and I don't think it's the case that we need a full rebuild or anything. I think we need to do something similar going into next season. And like I said, as much as it isn't liked by many people that we saw that laugh, and we kind of have to in terms of financial stuff and the model that the club's working on. It at least balances out our net spend for this season, and we should be able to do something similar at the start of next season. In terms of the the summer transfer window that we had, and we should be focusing on those full back positions. We should be focusing on bringing in more quality in centre midfield, potentially a new goalkeeper. I don't see that as a full rebuild because I think we have a lot of the pieces in place anyway. I think we are just missing little bits of quality throughout the team. That's not to say that this team shouldn't have been capable of more. I said the other day in our group chat, it could and should be better at this stage of the season. We should be in the top six at least with the team that we have. Keep building on that team. The higher expectations will be. But yeah, I think it was tactical reasons, and maybe just a bit of a wrong approach in terms of how we're approaching games, or wrong approach on the training ground, or something that's just led to us being a bit soft in games. Maybe we're focusing a little bit too much on playing kind of like nice, aesthetically pleasing football when really we need at least one person in the team who's going to go through one of the other players. Well, not in terms of leadership and shouting at people before anyone starts saying that, but go through one of the opposition players and kind of like really get the crowd going in that respect, or take tactical fouls on the halfway line to stop a break when we need it. Because let's face it, being hit on the break is one of our weak points, and if we had someone taking tactical fouls, maybe we wouldn't be seeing that as much.
Yeah, the point on do we need another summer rebuild? I feel like we should, in all honesty. I was looking through our squad and thinking that Rav van den Berg and or Hayden Hackney are going to leave in the summer, which I think it's probably time for Hayden Hackney for the better of his career, to be honest. I only really see left wing as a position that we don't really need strengthening in, so long as Randy McGree can gain some form of fitness. But I'm looking at a goalkeeper. If Travers leaves and he doesn't come back, then we need a goalkeeper. I would flog Dieng and Glover and have Bryn as the number 2. With left back, we've had a whole conveyor belt of left backs. If Giles goes back, I guess I'm happy with Borges and Bangura. To be fair, I forgot Bangura existed. His fitness issues have been very prevalent this season, so I suppose the left side I'm kind of okay-ish with. Centre back we need to strengthen anyways. Right back, I would flog both of them, in all honesty. I have enjoyed Dijksteel's resurgence this season, but yeah, I feel like we need to be ruthless. Get rid of Ayling, get rid of Dijksteel, bring in 2 right backs that we can have there for the mid to long term. We need a centre midfielder anyway. Dan Barlaser, I think, would be one of the first players out the door for me. I think he's a good player in his own right, but I just don't think he suits this team. I don't think he suits a midfield 2. He's very susceptible against the press, and I feel like it can become, like, Boro can become awkward when Dan Barlaser is in the team. As I mentioned, I think Hackney will leave. McCabe is basically Hackney's regen, I would say. So invest stocks in McCabe, but still bring in at least 2 centre midfielders. Number 10, I want to see better depth in. I've mentioned it before. If we have a better option there behind Finazaz, I know we've got Whitaker, but I don't really want to see him there. I want to see him on the right, if anything. And then on the right itself, I would get rid of Force. He's unreliable. He's constantly injured. So be ruthless. Get rid of him. And then up front, you've only got Tommy Conway there if Force leaves. So we definitely need a striker in there anyways. So it's a big job for the recruitment team in the summer. It's exciting, but it's also a little bit daunting because I reckon that we probably will make do with certain positions. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't really address right back properly, because ultimately we didn't do that last summer either. Like, there will be positions in which I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, right, we probably could have done better there. I want to see Boro be more ruthless in the transfer window, and I want to see us bring in more good, steady Championship players. Try and see if you could test Blackburn's resolve for Lewis Travis. Maybe go and pinch Callum Lang from Portsmouth. Players as well that have been there and done it in the Championship, that have got promoted but can still actually make an impact. So not a Luke Ayling, for example. You know, these are the players that we want. We can obviously bring in our assets and whatever that keeps Boro ticking financially when we sell them for a profit. But I want to see good, consistent Championship performers. That to me is what makes a really good squad. Like I've mentioned before, 2 players per position that are specialists in that set position, and then that third option is a do-a-job player. So I want to see a little bit more, like, versatility is good, but I want to see a little bit more speciality within Boro's squad in certain positions. So yeah, the summer transfer window is going to be very interesting indeed. And the next question is from Lawrence on Facebook. He says, my question for you is Michael Carrick too calm? He always says he doesn't get too carried away after a win and not too despondent after a loss. His demeanour on the touchline is passive and his interviews are uninspiring. If his public persona is replicated in the dressing room and on the training pitch, is that having the effect on the players that it is having on me? A football coach is as much about motivating players and man management as it is about tactics. Look at what Jack Charlton did at Boro and Ireland. So, Tom, do you think Michael Carrick is too calm?
Maybe a little bit. On the flip side of that, I don't want an angry, aggressive manager who's just going to get, carried away shouting all the time. And, we brought in managers who had famously entertaining press conferences in the past, and they signed half for Scotland and couldn't make it work. So, on the opposite side of the spectrum, we don't want that again. I would kind of like somewhere in the middle where, we are going to have a manager who maybe shows a little bit more emotion on the touchline. Worth saying, none of us know what Michael Carrick's like behind closed doors and what he's like in the dressing room. So he could be a lot louder and shouty in the dressing room. We don't know that. But yeah, in terms of the, on the touchline, he's always out on the touchline. He's always kind of talking, but it does seem to be kind of more calm. I've seen him get carried away many times after a goal, so I don't buy that he says he doesn't get too carried away after we win. Because we have seen him literally get carried away by the coaching staff after we scored, and they all jump on each other. In terms of press conferences, it's a bit of a weird one because, like I said, using Gordon Strachan as the example, but like say we've had Neil Warnock before who gave really entertaining press conferences, but we all got kind of sick of them by the end because we were like, right, you're laughing and joking in these press conferences, but we're not kind of doing that much as a team. And Warnock probably was the balance of getting shouty on the touchline and giving stuff away in press conferences and stuff like that. I do kind of favour the side of management where we don't get as much in the press conferences. Karanka was very similar. And yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. I think some of this stuff maybe doesn't have a massive effect in terms of the press conferences, but then in terms of motivating the players, I completely agree with that point. And you need a coach where the players are going to run through a brick wall for them, but then also a coach or someone on the coaching team who is tactically astute. And I don't think we have that at the moment.
Yeah, I'm gauging from you that you don't think Boro have quite the right blend. To be honest, there's different styles of management, isn't there? I don't think either are the blueprint for success. I would love to be a fly on the wall in the changing rooms just to see what Carrick is like. I'm pretty sure a player came out, it might have been Luke Ayling, and said that he's very much similar to how he is in the press, in the dressing room. So I do sometimes wonder if Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough team are a reflection of him. So it's an interesting point. We're not ever to know definitively whether, having a more shouty, animated manager on the touchline is going to make a difference. I personally veer towards the side of it not making a difference, but it is an interesting talking point nonetheless.
Yeah, I don't know if... I mean, to be fair, a point where it has made a difference, I still have it ringing around in my head. Peel is shouting at Adama over on the other touchline from
True.
From the dugout at the Riverside.
True.
Can probably argue that did work, but
yeah.
I'm kind of very similar as well. I've just had an example pop into my head there, but you watch the Arsenal documentary on Amazon, and Mikel Arteta probably comes across fairly similar to Carrick, I would say, in the press, in that he is quite calm in his press conferences and stuff, but then you watch what he's like in the changing rooms on that show. Sometimes it's similar, sometimes he is a little bit more what's the right word I'm looking for here? No, it's completely gone. He is a little bit more like shouty and stuff in certain games, but you don't have to be all the time, otherwise it loses its effect.
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting talking point nonetheless. Right, should we discuss Stoke then? Because they got tonked off Norwich at the weekend. So I feel like Tuesday night's game is going to be quite the shit off. And we have our friend of the pod, Ben Rowley, to talk about Matt Robbins' side.
Hey up guys, my name's Ben. I'm a Stoke City fan. I've been asked to preview our game with you guys on Tuesday night at the Bet365 Stadium, which, to be honest, for me is a really hard one to call. Our season has been, as ever, completely topsy-turvy. We're on our third manager already, as you guys will know, because you've played the other two previously. We obviously got a really thumping win in the Cup under Steven Schumacher, which was totally unexpected, to be honest. Less unexpected, though, than him leaving 5 league games into the season, straight after the transfer window, and being replaced by Narcis Palak, who I think we played you guys when it was his second game in or something like that. And to be honest, we didn't really get much better from that point on. We were appalling under him. A really bad record, one of the worst managerial records we've ever had. Tactics that didn't suit us or the Championship, to be honest. Not getting the best out of certain individuals. Individuals that I may add, to be fair, some really key players have been injured for us this season. Million Manhuff's been injured for some period of time. We signed Boston Lowell in the summer, who we thought was going to be, a mainstay in our midfield. He's not even started a game for us yet because we signed him with a back injury. And there's been at least a dozen of our squad out injured, and it's only recently that we're starting to get those players back, which for me is why this game in particular is really hard to call, along with our recent record under Mark Robbins. We seem to be a lot better defensively than we used to be, and we seem to be a lot better going forward than we used to be as well. I think we scored something like 10 goals in our last 4 games or something like that. But we can never get them right at the same time. We just haven't found that balance yet. We're either, not bad going forward with some good fluid transition, but leaving ourselves open at the back and a lack of discipline, or we seem to be quite, sturdy at the back, quite rigid, but not having the pace and power to drag ourselves back up the pitch again. And as I've said, partially that is just due to the number of injuries we've had, and we've got a relatively young squad, and those guys have been working, I would say, relatively hard throughout the whole season, and I think it's catching up with them slowly. In terms of finding the balance, I know that's something that you guys have really struggled with under Michael Carrick, and particularly recently. I know your record has been dreadful, and I know that there are, perhaps surprisingly from a neutral, but whispers of, maybe Carrick being at the end of the line at Middlesbrough. But it's weird, like, I see Stoke and Boro as two almost alike but polar opposites. We always do just enough to stay up in the league, and you guys always manage to just fall short of challenging for promotion. We both do the bare minimum in opposite regards. This game is so hard to call for me. Stoke are like a box of chocolates, and Middlesbrough, albeit with poor form, I know that there's quality in there and that can win games. There are some more players coming back for Stoke game by game that may help us, but also they're coming out from the cold. Sam Gallagher's a good one, played his first game since December or January, I think. So you're going to ask me for a score prediction. I am going to say that we both cancel each other out into a 1-1 draw. I think both teams are going to be relatively tired. I think both teams aren't going to want to lose, given you guys just to stop the slide and us, every point is valuable. Both teams really need a win, but I don't think either team is going to get one. So yeah, I'm going to stick with a 1-1 draw and a Stoke goal. I'm going to go for Million Man Huff in the hopes that he starts his first game since December. Best luck for the rest of the season after Tuesday, obviously. And I hope you guys keep hold of Michael Carrick, because I think there's still some unscratched potential under him, but you guys will know way better than me, and we are not a club to harp on about keeping hold of a manager, are we? All the best, guys. See you later.
Thanks for that, Ben. Tom, predictions for this one?
I'm probably going to go 1-0 Stoke, to be honest. I can't see anything else other than that at the moment.
I don't blame you.
Scoring as well.
Yeah, I think my bold prediction pre-season was that Michael Carrick will beat Matt Robbins. Obviously, he was at Coventry then, he's at Stoke now, so he still has an opportunity to do that, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I'm going to go with another Desmond, another 2-2, which probably won't actually do anything for us, I don't think. I think right now we're looking for wins, right, not draws, so yeah, we will see. But that is it for today's podcast. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to give it a like, subscribe, give us a rating on your podcast provider as well. And hopefully, by the time you next hear us, Boro have won a game of football. Until then, take care and up the Boro Breakdown.